Hello, spooky friends. This is John from Dairyland Frights. And today we have a special treat. We have Courtney Sharp from the Haunts Paranormal Podcast, and she will be talking about the Anna Lyons House, a very spooky tale. So she'll be driving the episode. I'm really excited that you guys get to hear this. It's a very spooky episode.
All right, so today we're here with John from Dairyland Frights podcast. How are you doing?
I am doing great. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited just to have more people on the show. And like I said to the listeners at home, we've been talking a lot before this. You guys just remind me so much of Chilluminati podcast, which is like my favorite, like one of my favorite podcasts of all time. So I just really commend your energy and how much fun you guys have together.
Yeah.
So do you want to tell the listeners, just for their reference, where we can find you online and a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So we're Dairyland Frights, and we are a podcast that covers everything creepy, mysterious, and spooky in the Midwest. And you can find us on Twitter at dairylandfrights.com, Facebook, Instagram. Also, we're on Podbean. So we're at Dairyland Frights, podbean.com. And a little bit about myself. I love the paranormal. I've loved it since I've been a little kid. It's been really fun for me to talk to other people, especially you, Courtney. And Courtney and I, by the way, before we get on this, we shared a couple funny stories and everything to kind of get to know each other. But you know, one of the things I always say in the Midwest, there's a ton of stories. I mean, a lot of people forget that. And by the way, not that this is a serial killer podcast, but who knows? Maybe down the line, you never know.
I mean, hey, I love true crime.
We have two of the heavy hitters, Geen and Dahmer.
Dahmer scares the crap out of me. Just as like a side note, funny stories that I've done to myself. So right after that Netflix documentary came out, I watched like the first few episodes, and obviously I know his story well enough. Yeah. And to be honest, like the show kind of freaked me out, just because if there's anything that's going to freak me out, it's going to be real life people.
Yes.
Not the dead. So I stopped watching it, and a couple weeks later, I was like, I want to get a new pair of glasses. Order a new pair of glasses. I get them sent to Georgia, and it's like literally the week of my wedding. I get them sent to my like husband's parents' house.
Yeah.
And they show up in a box because it's like a little bit more reliable. Sure. They live in a more urban area than I do.
Mm-hmm.
And so I get them out of the box and I put them on. I show my husband. I'm like, what do you think? And he's like, you look like Jeffrey Dahmer. And I was like, oh, no,
That's
I
awesome.
got aviator glasses. And he's like, oh, did you not do that on purpose? I'm like, why would I do that on purpose? Yeah. But they were on sale. And that's obviously why they were on sale. No one was buying them. But I wanted a pair of all metal frame glasses. And I was like, those are really cool.
Courtney, you should have read where it says Dahmer like glasses on sale.
Yeah, I know. And then we're having like all of our, like, obviously it's our wedding. So a lot of like our really close friends are coming in. We have friends from out here in Montana flying in. So we pick one of them up from the airport. He watches or like listens to a lot of true crime as well. And I'm like, hey, and he's like, those glasses are not good. That's like the first thing he says to me wedding weekend. And I'm like, thanks, friend. And then my maid of honor is also like, you look like Jeffrey Dahmer, man. So now I have to wear them if I'm not wearing contacts because I need to see. But yeah, so.
By the way, side note, Courtney, for you and your husband, if you're ever in the Midwest, obviously say hi. But in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I'm not kidding, this is totally serious, folks, there is a Jeffrey Dahmer tour where they will take you to the bar where he got his first victim. They will take you to the area. By the way, excuse me, they destroyed his apartments. Those apartments have been leveled, but they will take you there.
Isn't there like a memorial there now?
Yeah, kind of. There's like a little
statue.
there's a little bit of a plaque and stuff. Also, they would take you past the chocolate factory. So the next time you eat chocolate, just remember Jeffrey Dahmer probably packaged that.
No. It is so gross too, just knowing like what he ate. Anyways,
it's terrible.
Not to take this to a place of cannibalism.
It's terrible. Like I said, the funny thing, just really quick before we get to our topic today, is bachelorette parties love taking the Jeffrey Dahmer tour. I have no idea why. You explain to me, Courtney.
I believe it because, well, true crime podcast and just, I have another, like a male friend who doesn't or didn't at the time understand why women like murder podcast. And I'm sure like this is like, there are other reasons too, but at least from my general understanding is young women are the typical target of a serial killer. Therefore, we listen for like the signs and like how to protect ourselves.
Oh, sure.
But also, I mean, I would have, if I went there for my bachelorette weekend, we would have 100% done that tour just because it's interesting. Not because I'm like a fan of that guy, because he creeps me out like no other, but like him, like Jeffrey Dahmer in specific, like really, not that like I have like a favorite, but he's the one that like scares me the most out of all of them. But I would still take the tour just because I would be interested. Like for my 21st birthday, I was in England and we did the
nice
Jack the Ripper tour. And we went to all of the locations.
Sure.
So, and that's the first like I had ever heard. Not, I mean, I've heard of him before, but like that was like the first time I heard the full story of Jack the Ripper. My dad thought it was like a ghost tour because it was branded as Haunted London, and then it was like the Jack the Ripper experience. So we're going through it and he's like, what about the ghost? And I'm like, Dad, be quiet, this is so interesting.
Dad, shut up, we're just trying to do this, Dad. You're ruining it, Dad.
I mean, it's fine. He was just upset because he like knows that I love ghosts more than I would love like a serial killer kind of situation. Not that I mean, I listen to true crime all the time, but he was just trying to make it like a fun experience for my birthday. And I'm like, no, this is everything and then some. And he's just like, I want to hear about the ghosts.
And Ed Gein's house, which burned down, is 2 hours away from me, which I plan to do a on-site investigation, because they say when you go to his former home, you just feel dread, you feel just like nauseous. It's terrible. So anyway,
I mean, he's another one with just like the different memorabilia that he made. I'm sure the energy there is not good for sure. If you end up going, let me know, because I'd love to hear more about it. But I guess we should kind of hop into this. And I'm then excited. Finally, just for like the listeners at home, I will have all of John's stuff linked in the show notes. I meant to mention that earlier. That way, if you're like, you finish listening to this, you want to go check out his show, I'm about to be on that as well. So if you guys, or by the time this episode comes out, I think they would have already gone live. So if you guys are interested in listening to the story he tells me, for sure, go check him out. Everything will be linked below. But without further ado, I have a ghost story to tell you guys. I have my like notebook, so my apologies if you guys hear pages rustling.
Hey, Courtney, is that bound in skin and human blood and written in human blood?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I see the skin, but...
This is actually Ed Gein's notebook.
You got it. That's awesome.
For sure. Yeah.
Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure. It's,
No, oh yeah, for sure. It's it actually says creative thoughts, brilliant ideas, and inspiring dreams.
Nice.
I bought it because it was the only black notebook available at Barnes & Noble. Everything else was like pink and floral, which is obviously not my forte. So, but this is, like where I write like my ghost stories, if that makes sense.
All right.
So I've been like really, really excited to like surprise you with these stories.
All right.
So for some context for everybody listening at home, we connected probably about a week ago trying to figure out how we wanted to do this. And I thought it would be fun, instead of, telling our personal experiences, which of course we can do in the future.
Sure.
We thought it would be fun to kind of surprise each other with a topic And I went the route of, hopefully you've never heard this before, because I hadn't. I've heard of this location in terms of like the town, but I've never heard this story before, and it's a town that's super close to me. So, if you guys have listened to our recent like paranormal project, I'm not sure if you've heard of that, but it's a live series that I do with a few of my podcasting friends. Nice. And we recently talked about Virginia City, Nevada, which I'm sure you've heard of. It's like one of the most haunted ghost towns, like in the mid-ish West. Yes. But a lot of people don't know about the like smaller, equally spooky cousin that is Virginia City, Montana. Oh. It was actually named after Virginia City, Nevada, or maybe it was the other way around. One of them was named after each other. Yeah. But it's, I don't want to say equally as haunted because it's so much smaller, but there are a lot of ghosts there. I actually went there, I want to say it was like 3 or 4 days ago. Kind of did a little investigation. Nice. You guys can check that out on Instagram. But I bought a book, and it's titled Spirit Tailings. And then it says Ghost Tales from Virginia City, Butte, and Helena, which are all very old, very haunted towns in southwest and western Montana, which is kind of where I'm based. I'm not quite there. This town is about 2 hours away from where I live. Yeah. So I came across this story while reading it, and I thought it would be the perfect story to share with you guys today because it is.
Love it.
I'm not going to lie, it's a little graphic, but we've talked about serial killers, so it's fine. Okay. So first, a little bit of history, even though I know that this is kind of like the boring.
Yeah, we got to get to the boring stuff before we get to the good stuff, right, Courtney?
I know. It's context is everything. Also, I look like a ghost on this screen, but.
So, are you a ghost? Am I talking to a ghost? Wait a minute.
Possibly.
Sweet.
Possibly. There are ghosts around.
Sweet.
In my house.
Nice.
So if you see anything going on in the background, let me know, because they have the tendency of doing that. But
cool.
So Virginia City, Montana was an old mining township that was settled in the 1860s during the Montana Gold Rush. There are a lot of like mining townships here in Montana. Like I mentioned, Butte. That town is so haunted. But it's also a mining township that is now like a regular town, and they do ghost tours all the time. But like it just goes to show that this area is just like full of ghosts, and I think it's because of all of the different minerals that lie underneath. So at its peak, Virginia City, Montana had roughly 10,000 people flooding to the area. And by 1864, it was the largest mining territory in the state. So obviously, with the boom in population, it kind of became a breeding ground for crime and anarchy, just like every Western town was. Like at the time, this wasn't a state. So it was just like a little, I don't want to say like a camp, but it was essentially like a hamlet.
Right.
That was just like in the middle of the mountains in Montana. Right. And a lot of like negativity happened there. The most notorious of the outlaws that are actually haunting this town is the Kentucky cannibal Boone Helm. Ooh. Which I don't know if you've heard of him.
A little bit.
But so, okay, just as like a deep dive, not a deep dive, but like a quick segue out of this, just because this guy's crazy. He was born in Kentucky. And the way that I like to explain him to people who don't really know much about him is he maxed out his luck points in the pregame lobby. Right? So he's like the luckiest son of a bitch that I've ever met.
That's awesome.
Or not met, but like heard of.
Heard of. There you go.
And but he's so like evil and incredibly dumb. Like I don't know how he survived, but he essentially worked his way from Kentucky to Montana in the wilderness and survived off of murdering and eating people, which is super gross. But he was hanged in Virginia City and buried at the top of Boot Hill Cemetery, which is just outside of town. And that, sorry for all the page noises, at the top of the hill that he is buried at is exactly where our story begins. Nice. It's still there to this day, and this place is obviously incredibly haunted. I don't think that his like bones are still there, but his like grave marker is.
So Courtney, I just really quick question, not to take away your flow here, but If you think
you're fine.
Jeffrey Dahmer did a 23andMe, him and the Kentucky Cannibal would like maybe have some shared characteristics? I don't know.
I wonder. Well, I mean, obviously Dahmer was like way after him,
Right,
but like
right.
he's definitely the Jeffrey Dahmer of like that time period. Okay, I'm like freezing.
Gotcha. Cool.
Did my audio freeze for you?
No, you're still good.
Is the camera okay?
You freezed in the camera. Your camera
maybe
freeze.
It'll come back.
Yeah, your audio.
I don't want to like pause this or anything. Okay, are you cool if we just keep going and hopefully it'll catch up?
Yes.
Totally. It's a very becoming picture of me.
Yes. You very look thoughtful.
So yeah, I'm like in the middle of, I wonder why that happened. I'm so upset. This happened the other day where I was doing another like,
yeah, sure,
collaboration and it froze and I literally had to like end the call, leave the chat, close the browser and come back, and that's the only thing that fixed it.
Okay.
So I'm wondering if my internet connection here is not great. So I do apologize, but
that's fine.
Anyways, sitting just outside of Boot Hill Cemetery, there's a rather unsuspecting neighborhood. It's like a dozen or so houses that are sitting along this dirt road that lead from the town of Virginia City up about like, I'd say maybe a quarter mile, less than a mile stretch of dirt road up to this cemetery.
Okay.
And there is a house. It's on this street called Cover Street. And there's like this very small house. You probably wouldn't even, like if you looked at it, you would just say like, oh, it's an ordinary home. But there are two specific events in its past that I'd like to share with you that have led to kind of a creepy vibe and kind of situation there, if that makes sense.
Sure.
So the first brings us to the winter of 1865. I don't know if you've ever been out this way, but winter in Montana is very unforgiving.
Ooh,
especially in the 1860s.
So. Yeah, there's no snow blowers, there's no snow plows. Yeah.
No. And I found out the other day that Virginia City, as just like an area, has like a microclimate where it's like very cold in comparison to the rest of the state, which I can't imagine because like even where I live, way, like not way far away, but like, 2 hours away.
Yeah.
It's still freezing here in the wintertime. And this happened, in the dead of winter. So it was only about like a month after Anna and Martin Lyons, who are kind of main characters for this first event, moved into the house on Cover Street with their two sons, Robert and George. I want to say that one of them was like 21 and the other was 12, and they came in on a covered wagon in like July of that year. And then by January, they were already living there and, they were living in the house and kind of getting a feel for things. And Martin, her husband, was a very successful business owner in Virginia City. He owned a tailor shop, so he was the guy to go to buy clothes, get your clothes altered, get them like fixed if you like, tore them working, because obviously that time period was very much like kind of, I hate to say blue collar work, but you know what I mean? You're working with your hands. So like he was busy and he was profitable.
Nice.
And one day in about mid-January of that year, so very beginning of the year, he is walking home on a very cold and snowy night right after work. And I will say that his tailor shop is not, or at least from what I saw, it's not very far from where he lived. So obviously he didn't feel the need to bring a horse or anything. He would just walk the like, few blocks and then some change up the hill to his house.
You're right.
But on his way home on this particular evening, it's snowing. Visibility is low in mid-January, obviously, just due to the solstice being like, less than a month ago. So he was actually targeted and attacked and killed on his way home. And then his attackers stole all of his profits that day. So he had them in his pockets and they just like, attacked him and took the money.
Oh my God.
And went on their merry way.
Oh no.
So his poor wife.
Yeah.
Is obviously distraught because it's, getting later. It's already dark out. The weather's not getting any better. And her husband hasn't come home. And at this point, she's like, okay, something has happened and I need to go find him before I can't get to him. But unfortunately, her initial kind of search for him due to the snowfall was unsuccessful, because by the time that she decided she needed to go out and look for him, the minor snowfall that he had been walking home in had turned into a raging blizzard.
Oh, of course.
And yeah, so it's like several feet on the ground at this point. Visibility again is super low. She doesn't have the means of finding him on her own.
Yeah.
And she's got 2 kids at home to take care of. So she's forced to like just kind of abandon him, sadly.
Oh, no.
So, yeah, I know. And it's like, can you imagine just, because obviously you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, because you've got your kids.
Mm-hmm.
The weather is making it nearly impossible to see less than a foot in front of your face. And you know that your husband is somewhere on this road, but you can't find him.
Oh, that's the worst.
And obviously she knew, I think, by the time that she returned home that it wasn't boding well for Martin. Yeah. So a couple days pass, the storm finally dissipates, and she's able to get a search party together. And within like the first hour of this search, they find his body just outside of town on Cover Street.
Jeez.
This is so graphic, and I do apologize, like I said, but we've already talked about every serial killer under the sun at this point.
Yeah.
So his head was kind of, I don't want to say it was like completely gone, but like they could tell the cause of death was someone like blunt force trauma to the head.
Oh, yeah? Oh, boy.
Yeah, and she knew with his like pockets being empty that someone had stolen from him. The killers are still at large. So, you know, that just added insult to injury at that point. And then she's even further upset because her husband is buried at the top of Boot Hill, which we mentioned earlier.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Now, from what I can tell at the time, there were like 2 cemeteries, and Boot Hill, which is like just a stone's throw away from her house, was where all of the like outlaws were buried.
The dregs of
society.
Like
so she's like, why are you, like, he was an honest man. Like, she was very upset that he was buried there. And for good reason, because beyond the outlaws being there, at that time, this cemetery also had a haunted reputation. So,
of course it did.
Let's talk about that, if you don't mind. We're going to take a quick segue. I promise we'll get to the rest of the story. But just for some context of what you might see at the top of Boot Hill, include shadow figures, like spectral orbs and unexplainable lights. This wasn't at the time, but there's a merch stand to like buy like a gift shop essentially. That's like at the bottom of Boot Hill. I know. I went in there the other day.
Hilarious.
And I was like, I didn't realize like what it was, because it was called like Boot Hill like General Store or something like that. And I just thought that they took the name from like the hill that's like just behind the store. So I just kind of like, oh, cool. Like, let's go in here. I will say the shop itself is super creepy. Half of it is like you can buy like crystals and stuff, which, you know, that's cool to me. But the other half is just like a random hodgepodge of like, like hiking clothes and then like t-shirts for like the cemetery.
And
but the whole thing is just like very,
I bet you that's beef jerky.
Like, they had like, I don't know if you know what Fit Kicks are, but they're like water shoes.
Yeah.
But they also had like Sherpa on the inside. So they were selling like slippers, but they were also selling like snacks, and then they were selling minerals, like crystals and stuff like that. It was a very like hodgepodge kind of situation. And I will say too, not to like bash this gift shop, because the woman in there was very nice.
Sure.
But it was just like, and I would have bought crystals from her if I had like the time to look, but it was just really like dark in there. Even with the lights on, you could tell it was a super old building, and they did what they could to like remodel it. But with this area being a historic site, there wasn't much they can do. So it looks as haunted as it is, to put it bluntly. But the merchandise and stuff at this store will constantly go missing after closing hours. So for a while, they were thinking like someone's stealing from us. And then they realized like, oh, it's probably the fact that like we named our store and sell merchandise for Boot Hill, which is just like haunted as all hell behind us.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of stuff apparently goes missing. And like I said, like the shop itself, the woman is super nice and they seem relatively successful. And it's just like your generic gift shop. But when you walk in, you're like, whoa, this is
heavy.
not what I was expecting in terms of an atmosphere.
Sure.
Another notable spirit, or probably the most notable spirit, I should say, is that of Billy Clayton. He's buried up on Boot Hill. I couldn't find much about like his story, and I didn't want to get off too much on a tangent here. But he supposedly raises from his grave every single night. And so if you go up there past like sundown, you're supposed to be able to see his like silhouette standing behind his grave.
Cool.
Which I think is super cool.
Yeah.
I've never been there at night. And apparently you can take about like people who take pictures there have experiences where they'll catch somebody behind them that isn't actually there. I've never had that experience before, but I'll definitely be like keeping an eye out for the next time that I go. But yeah, if you go there after dark, apparently you can see his like silhouette standing behind his grave, which is also kind of going back to the shadow figures that I mentioned at the beginning.
Yeah.
He's probably the one that they're attributing that to, but they believe that to be Billy Clayton because he's standing like right next to his grave or close by, kind of pacing. So that's interesting. If you ever want to go there, do let me know because I'd love to see it at night.
Yes, please. Love to see some pictures.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like I've had experiences where I've seen like shadow figures and stuff like that, but you never know who it is. And with it being somebody who they're like 100% sure, like this is him.
Yeah,
I'd love to go and see that, but
Courtney,
we'll see. To me, saying,
oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
No, I was just going to say,
go ahead.
Public service announcement from Haunts and Dairyland Frights. Don't take a Ouija board up there.
Oh, yeah.
Don't do that. Just.
Yeah, we had do you want to tell that story really quick? Do we have a second to kind of segue out of it?
If you're okay with it, yeah. So, one of my employees, when I was a manager, she took some of her friends to a cemetery. They had a Ouija board. Things went crazy. They forgot to close it and say goodbye. And when she asked for my help, I told her what she needed to do. And so when she went back, the groundskeeper had ran over it with his lawnmower and it was completely destroyed. In the meantime, they are having these weird like dreams and terrible things are like happening to them, and they're seeing shadow people. And the mom of the girl who did this came to my store to ask me what they could do, which I told them, go get a new Ouija board, go to the cemetery, say goodbye, and just end it. And then everything went fine after that, according to them. They did not have any other issues that they brought up. But the moral of the story is, don't do that. And you don't want shadow people going around and everything, haunting you. Right. You may think it's cool. It's not cool. And remember to press goodbye. And,
yeah, for sure.
That to me, it's just freaky. So anyway. Go ahead.
Yeah, especially if you're taking it to such an active cemetery. I mentioned this to you before we started, and I know I've mentioned it to my listeners in passing, but like cemeteries as like a general rule of thumb usually are the most haunted places because that's where people go to rest. And if they're going to haunt something, it'll be something that's significant to them during life. However, this is also a location where people, unfortunately, were hanged.
Correct.
So obviously that's a significant moment of your life, and it is haunted, like I said, as all hell. So I'm assuming taking a Ouija board there would be an invitation for some really nasty experiences. So yeah, don't do that.
Yes.
And I mean, and if you do choose to play with a Ouija board, just say goodbye and like know the rules and know what you're doing, because all equipment and all spiritual like tools that you can use to communicate with the other side are going to have the same sort of invitation attached.
Correct.
So just be, I don't want to say arrogant or like confident in what you're doing, but just know what you're doing before you go into it. Otherwise you might be, inviting something into your life that you do not want there. But
correct.
thank you for the public service announcement.
Yes, we did our good deed for today, Courtney.
We did. Now we can talk about some not so happy stuff. So due to the like haunted reputation that Boot Hill has, even back then, a lot of the loved ones of people who were buried there decided that they wanted to exhume their loved ones' bodies and move them to the other cemetery, which is at the bottom of the same hill. So it's not too far away, but they just didn't want their family members there with these like really awful people, because most of them were like murderers or like even like just like thieves.
Yeah.
But they just people with these like nefarious reputations. They didn't want their like quote unquote respectable people, like their respectable loved ones, to be buried in close quarters. Sadly, this wasn't possible for Martin Lyons because for whatever reason they had him buried in an unmarked grave.
Oh.
And his whereabouts in terms of the gravesite are still unknown. So like we know he's up there, but we don't know exactly where. And like what makes me sad about this is you can drive up to it and then it's kind of like a roundabout situation to the 5 outlaws where their bodies have been for the most part exhumed. And like their gravestones are up there. So you can drive around just the headstones.
Yeah.
But like somewhere up there are still people buried that were, because a lot of people were buried in unmarked graves. I even think at the time those 5 outlaws were buried in unmarked graves. So obviously, like you can see why Anna was upset that her husband was up there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, number one, we don't really, like, it's easy to lose track of where he was.
Yeah.
Especially because she lived for another 30 years after the fact. So it's easy to lose track. Then we're moving graves of other people. So who knows if he was, like, taken partially from there, assuming he was part of somebody else's grave site. And it's also a very small, like, very, very small cemetery.
Yeah.
So I can see why she was so angry about it, but she I guess decided she wanted to stay in that house until she passed away, which makes sense. She's at least close to her husband there. Wherever his body may have ended up after the fact, we don't know, but at least I think in her heart of hearts, she knew like this is where he was most in his life, and this is where I can be close to him in his death. So she stayed there for the remainder of her life until she passed away in 1896. So like I said, another like 30 years after this fact, she kind of muddled through. I want to say that she was like working as like kind of like a housemaid for another family in town. And that's kind of how she made her keep, because obviously her husband, who was providing for her, was no longer there. And then any money that he did had was...
She ever get remarried?
No.
Wow.
Her sons grew up, like, obviously there was, I want to say it was George was the older one. He was already, 21 years old, but the other one was a great deal younger, but they both ended up getting married and actually leaving Montana, and she was utterly alone for the rest of her life. I mean, she had her, like, community around her.
Yeah.
I know. But she remained there for like I said, another 3 decades. And her kids... didn't stay.
See you, Ma.
Which is so sad.
Where are you guys going? I lost my husband and I don't know where he is. See you, Mom. What?
Like, I'm actually married now, so I'm leaving. But
yeah, I gotta go. Yeah, see ya.
Yeah, I've got stuff to do in California.
Yeah,
which I think that's where they ended up going. I want to say that the book said they went like further west.
Okay.
And there isn't much more west than California, but
good.
Yeah. So don't quote me on that, but that was my understanding, is that they went westward even further in search of their own like destiny with their families.
Yeah.
But she remained, passed away in 1896, and then things were kind of uneventful for the next few years until another family moved in and another tragedy occurred.
Okay.
So, and this is where kind of the more ghost, in my opinion, this is where the ghosts kind of come in. But it was 1905, so actually a decent amount of time, like 10 years later, when Amanda and Frank Mckeen moved into what is now known as the Anna Lyons House. So you can look all of this like up online. but it's under the Anna Lyons House. And I will say it's this very, like, you wouldn't think that it was haunted by looking at it. Really? You really wouldn't. Like,
okay.
But it has such a tragic history. And as we were about to see, history kind of repeats itself here. So Frank, like Martin, was very successful, especially in the town of Virginia City. By the time that they moved in, he had taken over the town's prized Fairweather Inn, and that was like in the 1890s when he took that over. So with the money that he made from that, he was able to buy this property, and he and his wife moved in there.
Okay.
They actually also opened up a bar that was in the Fairweather Inn itself, and I think that's where he made the majority of his like money. But with the prohibition, he obviously that was shut down, and then I think that was in 1819 or 1918.
Yeah,
1918.
Okay.
And they shut him down in 1918. He passed away a year later, and Amanda was kind of left in a similar position as Anna had been. She had no way of providing herself. Like, I guess she could have like worked, but at the time that wasn't obviously the norm for young women.
Right.
So she unfortunately took a different route. And this is, I will say, this is where things get like really kind of graphic, and I do apologize, but I think me explaining it in this way shows you exactly what we're dealing with in terms of a spirit. So I'm going to share this. She took matters into her own hands. And the following is an excerpt from an article that was published in the Madisonian. So like this took place in Madison County.
Okay.
This was published on March 30th, 1923. So, sorry. Quote, neighbors were shocked Wednesday morning upon discovering Mrs. Amanda Mckeen, sorry. Let me start that over.
Take two.
Quote, neighbors were shocked Wednesday morning upon discovering Mrs. Amanda Mckeen, who had committed suicide by shooting.
Oh.
It was evident that she had been in unsound mental condition for some time. So this, like I said, it happened like several years past. So like 1923, and he passed away in 1918. So she had been, for that whole period, just not very well in terms of her mental health, which is really sad. Mm-hmm. So on Tuesday, she went to Butte, supposedly for the sole purpose of purchasing a revolver. Returning Wednesday morning, she went immediately to her home, entered the bathroom, placed the muzzle of the gun in her mouth, and forced a shot upward into her brain. So that was a quote, like I said, from the Madisonian. And I do apologize if that was like a little, brought us to a really sad place. But like I said, I think that kind of goes to show just what, like, the kind of heartbreak that this spirit has. So over a century after this tragedy takes place, a woman by the name of Lucille moves into the Anna Lyons house. She purchased it, and she had some fairly, let's say, wild complaints about the house's bathroom. I couldn't tell. I heard different reports of it being on the first floor and on the second floor. So I'm not entirely sure. To me, this looks like a one-story house, so I'm sure it's probably just on the main level. But either way, she would complain to her neighbors kind of about the situation going on in her bathroom. Apparently, on the regular occasion, she would see the apparition of a woman who is just like covered in blood from head to toe. I know. That's why I wanted to read you that. Like, I know it's like a really dark place to take this, but like this spirit has to be Amanda.
Yeah.
Just based off of the description of what Lucille was saying, because she was covered from blood, or with blood from head to toe. And then she would like appear for a couple of seconds, and then right in front of Lucille's eyes, she would disappear.
Oh no.
And this woman's like freaking out for obvious reasons, because like even seeing a spirit in general is like kind of jarring, especially if you're not used to it.
Yeah. You're brushing your teeth, right? You're brushing your teeth. You're getting ready for the morning. You're doing your hair.
Yeah.
And it's like, wah!
I know. And like, can you imagine if you're like sitting like in your bathroom, like you said, brushing your teeth, and you're looking in the mirror, and then this woman like just flashes behind you covered in blood? Like, oh my God, I would freak out. I mean, And when I was reading this yesterday, because was reading this yesterday and like doing like my research and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking about my bathroom, which like I just hated in there for some reason. Like, and we have one of those like open and closed kind of medicine cabinets.
Oh, sure.
And so I'm always terrified, like when I open it, because that's where I keep like my toothbrush and toothpaste and stuff. I'm always worried that I'm going to see someone behind me when I close the door.
Yeah, it's a jump scare.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a jump scare.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it reminded me of The Shining.
Oh, right.
Like this whole, because I mean, obviously that woman wasn't like covered in blood in the books or anything like that, but like when I was reading, I'm like, ooh, like that freaks me out because it's. And the title of this story in this like book that I have, which I will also try to link in the show notes. I don't know if it's anywhere online because I bought this in like a little shop in Virginia City, but this is titled "The Body in the Bathtub," which the title really intrigued me. I didn't realize what I was getting myself into.
I love that.
But yeah, I thought it was, I don't know, because we talked about it the night before of like, let's like surprise each other with our stories.
Yeah.
So I went there with the sole intention of finding a book and finding
I love it.
like a story that was local, because I'm like, I have to.
Yeah.
I want to tell people about this place because I feel like it's lesser known than its cousin. Obviously. So, like I said, she would kind of start to Lucille. She would tell her neighbors and members of the community like what she was experiencing because she lived there alone. And she was obviously super freaked out, as any of us would be, with like the woman appearing in the mirror in front of her, like while she's like bathing or something. Like I would freak out.
Yeah.
So yeah, she looked to her community for comfort, and sadly, which I thought was like super messed up, a lot of the people in the town at the time didn't believe her, and they started calling her, quote, loose wheel instead of Lucille, which I was like, that is so mean. I mean, I heard like based off of this book, it seems that they still like had a very like fond kind of perspective when it came to Lucille, but yeah, they thought she was a little bit out there because of what she was complaining about.
Yeah, it's a different time.
And I mean, I think that she was a little bit older in years, so maybe they thought like, you know, there was some like
correct, yeah,
deterioration,
like
sadly,
dementia,
and they humored her.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think they humored her, but no one really took her seriously. Yeah. And behind her back, they would call her loose wheel, which is mean. But
oh no,
that all changed when when a man named Tim Gordon bought the property from Lucille as she got a little bit older, and he moves in, and shortly after, he starts having a similar experience. He'd go into the bathroom, he'd be, you know, going about whatever he needs to do, brushing his teeth, getting ready for the day, washing his face. And this woman, covered in blood from head to toe, would appear in front of him. He'd like see her, and then she would just disappear right in front of his eyes. And in that moment, he's like, okay, so she was telling the truth. There is something here.
Yeah.
Right. And at the time, because this happened in like, I want to say, for Lucille, she moved in the 40s and like grew older there. And then Tim bought this property from her in the 1980s. So by then, with record keeping, there isn't a lot going on in terms of like what happened to the house's history. So no one knew about the two tragedies that happened during the 1860s and early 1900s. So he starts digging through the records of this property, finds Amanda's story and finds Anna's story. And he's like, so this is obviously, the spirit's obviously one of these two women, most likely Amanda, based off of the description. So that being said, like Amanda, as tragic as her story was, and even Anna's, but Amanda, let's just say, isn't alone in her afterlife. Like she's the only spirit I believe that's at the Anna Lyons house. Okay. I don't think Anna's also there. Or at least I couldn't find any record of Anna's spirit being there.
Yeah.
But Amanda, like I said, she and her husband owned the Fairweather Inn that was down in town. And again, this wasn't very far away from like the house on Cover Street. Yeah. So there are spirits there. And I believe I have no like evidence of this, just from my own like understanding. I think that she goes back and forth.
Oh, wow.
So I'm going to tell you Yeah, I think she kind of comes there and then also goes to the Fairweather Inn because there are spirits there that kind of remind me of her. So to end this, I kind of want to tell you about the activity that occurs there. So, and it's not just her. There's like a lot of ghosts in the Fairweather Inn. The first being the spirits of children that like to play specifically on like the first floor with like the guests, like when they're checking in their children. So if they see kids coming in with their parents to check in to the inn, they'll go to the like lobby level and play with them while they're checking in, and the parents will turn around and see that their kid is talking to thin air.
Yeah. Right.
Which is terrifying to me.
That is terrifying.
I hate, I don't know about you, but like I hate ghost kids. Something about them freaks me out.
That's hilarious.
And like I know I've said this a lot, like in terms of this creeps me out, that creeps me out, but like not a lot like truly scares me in terms of the spirit world. But
so Courtney, this is hilarious because if I ever had a ghost child, because I don't know if you've heard stories where people hear like a ball bouncing against the wall, and it's like a little kid who died whenever, and now he bounces his ball against the wall. I don't know if you ever hear stories like that. So you're trying to sleep and you hear ba-doom, ba-doom, ba-doom. And look at, so what's hilarious about me, which I want this to happen someday. So I'm a dad, I have 2 kids. I would love to be just scream, "Hey, you stupid kid, stop bouncing the ball." That's the kind of dad I am. That's the kind of, like, I wouldn't be scared of the child. I'd be like, "Will you shut up?"
Just be like a parent to him as well.
Exactly, be like a dad. Like when my kids were little, when they would like be up and they'd be like in the other room playing with Legos or something, I'd always be, "Will you shut up? I'm trying to sleep." That's that would
my
be
dad
me.
would My dad would always tell me when I was a kid, like playing upstairs, like if I had like, you know, a friend stay over or something like that, he would always call me and tell me that I sounded like a herd of elephants.
Yeah, right. So dads are...
So exactly that. Just like quiet down.
Right. So I should be terrified, awesome. Courtney. I should be absolutely terrified. There's a ghost kid, right? But I just go into dad mode and be like, "Will you shut up?"
I mean, especially if it's like something that's in your everyday like routine. Like I have a friend, the same friend that I was telling you about earlier who had the weird poltergeist issue when she was a kid.
Yeah.
Her aunt lives in like the butt crack of Louisiana, just outside of New Orleans, and she plays parent to a ghost child that is at like her.
No.
Yeah. And this kid, he'll like take like toys off of the shelf, and she'll come in the morning and see that he has taken his toys out. She's purchased them just for him. And I mean, that's a way to approach it for sure.
Agree.
But something about like in terms of just like treating them like you are their parent, you know what I mean? Kind of like with you saying like, quiet down, like I'm trying to sleep. Yeah. Whereas with me, I'm like, oh God, I'm terrified. Not mainly just because I've come across so many stories of people saying that like there's a spirit here that pretends to be a kid, that it's actually a demon. And I just can't trust them. If I know for sure it's a kid, I'm like, sure, go off, go play.
Yeah.
But maybe not if I don't know.
Right. Yeah. If it's a cute little girl and she's saying, "Hi, Courtney, would you like to play with me?" Probably demon. So just, there you go.
The way that you're saying, like describing it, I just picture the Sally House. Which is another Midwest story.
Yes. I got to cover that.
Have you ever been there?
No. Funny thing about it is they know. So if you go online and look at it, and nothing against the Sally House, because they got to make their money, right? It can be anywhere from $500 to $1,500 a night. So I'm like, I can.
And it's definitely like, it's so expensive. I live obviously up here in Montana, but I'm from Georgia, like I said. And we drive back and forth. We go sometimes, depending on the route that Maps is saying is the best option, we'll go right through Atchison, Kansas. So I've driven by there so many times, but like you said, it's so hard to get it, like to get an investigation there.
Correct.
Which is why investigate as much as I'd like to and kind of do more of like the paranormal research.
Yeah.
Simply because that hobby is so expensive. It's so expensive.
And frankly, you would need a group. So frankly, it would be like, you got to get like, maybe 2 or 3, 4 people, like one's over here, one's over there. And you know what I'm saying? Doing it by yourself would be, I don't know, boring and be really difficult because, you'd be running around if you hear a noise, right? You heard a noise upstairs, you're running upstairs. You hear a noise downstairs, you're running downstairs. I mean, it's exhausting.
Yeah. It's a workout, like to run like up and down and all around the house. And if you're doing it by yourself too, it's like, well, it's going to do that. It's going to like, it's almost make fun, especially if it is a negative entity, which I personally believe it is.
Absolutely. I agree.
It's going to like make you run all around the house. It's not going to just have activity in the room that you're in out of convenience. It's not going to do that.
Oh no. It's going to mess with you. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So sorry, we keep going on tangents and I'm really happy about that, but I promise I'm almost done. So hotel staff will also complain of like feelings of uneasiness down in the basement, near the laundry room, which I found very intriguing because they say obviously running water gives them energy.
Oh, right.
And I'm assuming there's running water down there.
Yeah.
With all of like the pipes and everything going to the laundry room. So I mean, I believe them when they say that it's probably a very active area, but they specifically say when they're down there doing laundry, getting sheets for, guest rooms and stuff like that, they're just always like on edge. Which I couldn't find any sort of like concrete, like we see this, we hear this, blah, blah, blah. They're just constantly like at a higher level of anxiety. And then there's the most haunted room, which is room number 10. And apparently guests will just like run out in the middle of the night with no, they'll, I guess, check out by phone, but they'll like dip. Yeah, they're like, I just based off of the activity in there, which apparently it's doors and drawers and just like furniture kind of moving or shutting on its own. And then the thing that I'm sure gets a lot of people like moving is disembodied whispering from around the room.
Yeah, that's...
So can you imagine like just in the dark, you're sleeping. It's like an old, but it's like a very cute bed and breakfast. I will say that. But it's like, yeah, I posted pictures of it on Instagram if anyone's interested in going to see it. But it's like, it's a really just cute, it looks like a house, but it's got like a porch with those like big columns in the front. And I mean, you can tell like when you're looking at it, you're like, this is haunted for sure. But
that's haunted. It's
like really pretty. So it's like you're in your room and it's like one of like the nicer like suites and you're getting into bed. It's dark. The town is super quiet.
Oh, right.
And you just hear like, hey, you know what I mean? Like you're like, I would
chills.
I would jump out of my skin and then I'd probably investigate knowing me, but like most people would probably run for the hills.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then they'll check out like by phone. Like they don't want to have anything to do with the fair weather in after this activity starts happening overnight while they're trying to sleep.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, and this is kind of where I feel like our spirit of Amanda comes back. Guests will often report seeing a woman in like period clothing sashaying down the hallways.
Of course.
So like they'll see like hear her dress and like footsteps and then they'll like look out of their room and they'll see this like beautiful woman walking down the hallway and then kind of just evaporating as she gets to the end of the hall. So to me, that makes sense for her. She's not covered in blood.
Okay.
But I'm wondering if like that is like the same spirit.
See?
Again, I have no evidence of this. It was just my own theory.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But either way, she does have a connection to this hotel because she owned it with her husband for like maybe 20 years.
Oh, sure.
And they're the ones who made it what it is today.
Yeah.
And just in case you're wondering, the bar is open again. And if you want to go and stay there, it's pretty easy to get a room. I think you can just like literally like show up and check in.
But you don't check out.
Yeah, I'll have links to that in the show notes. Do what?
I said, but you don't check out. Just kidding.
Yeah, for real. It's the Hotel California, actually.
It's the Hotel California.
But yeah.
So really quickly, Courtney, For our guests, I don't know if you ever explained this. I explained this to on Dairyland Frights. There's two different types of hauntings. There's an intelligent haunting, which involves like movement, maybe someone speaking to you, maybe writing even. And then there's residual haunting, where it's like a movie. Like it's like you put it on every night.
It's playing over and over again.
Over and over and over and over. It's the same thing over and over. I'm sure your fans and supporters are super smart and know this, but I always remind people of that because there's a huge difference. And being that this ghost, Amanda, can teleport, kind of, being at her hotel, then maybe being at her house, maybe being other places. And that's an unusual one because that kind of fits in a different category that I'm not sure what that category is, but it's kind of a combination of intelligent versus residual. So it's interesting. And personally, I have to ask
I'm glad you brought that up too. Oh, go ahead.
No. I was going to say, okay, Courtney, be honest with me. Intelligent haunting, would you rather have, or residual haunting? Which one would you prefer?
I feel like intelligent, even though that can be obviously a little bit more dangerous. But if there's something there, like in my house, I would prefer to be able to kind of communicate with it and maybe help it pass on versus just watching somebody
you can't
go through their day-to-day routine. And I'm glad you brought that up. I don't think I've ever, I'm sure most people have, like, if they're listening to this sort of content, they know, but I don't think I've ever explained that on the podcast before, the differences between these types of spirits. But yeah, I feel like I would rather it be intelligent. That might be an unpopular opinion, but
no, I love that. I actually agree with you because residual haunting, God, that would be so boring, right? Let's say I've heard stories where like people like, there was like a little girl, I heard this ghost story where she sets the table at 6 o'clock every day. So these people would say like, okay, when they were selling their house, and I think it was in Iowa, and they were selling their house, and then at 6 o'clock, while they were talking to the potential buyers, they heard like, the cabinets opening and, somebody setting the table, right? The plates, and the people were like, who were buying the house go, oh, so do you have kids? And they were like, sort of. The owners were like, sort of. And they were like, sort of. What the hell do you mean by that, right?
What does that mean?
Yeah, so supposedly the prospective buyers went out into the kitchen, because the owner said, well, we'll show you, because it's going to come. And they showed them, and they could see the plates like moving through the air, landing on the table, the fork moving through the air, landing on the table, the glasses moving.
No way.
Yes. And this is,
I would buy that house so quick.
Oh, so would I. I hate setting
I'd be
for
so
dinner.
Excited. I know, I'm like, great. Like, we got these, like, they're doing their chores. That's awesome. I mean, and it was every time, like
6 o'clock
at the same time.
Bam, bam, bam. Right on the nose. Every day.
I wonder how many, like, place settings they
according to,
like, set out. Was it enough for everybody?
Yes, according to the owners, I think it was 4 or 6. But it was always an even number.
Oh, nice.
It was always an even number. So.
That's awesome. Because then, I would buy it so fast. One less chore that I have to do. It'd be cool if they would also, like, take them and then, like, wash the dishes.
They did not say that.
That's my least favorite part of dinner.
Absolutely. Put it in the dishwasher, ghost. Come on. So.
Yeah. I mean, that's still really cool, though. I mean, again, that might be an unpopular opinion, but it sounds just like, and this obviously is a residual haunting, but like, it just sounds like you have like a little friend helping you at dinner time.
Absolutely.
And you can always use another pair of hands in the kitchen. So
that one isn't too bad. But like after a while, if someone's, like I said, bouncing a ball like at 1 o'clock every morning, you got to go to work the next morning, you're like, will you shut up? That's where you're like, come on. I don't like that. That's
where it's like, this is, and I feel like it's like that, or if they're, because like you said, it sounds like Amanda, at least at the Anna Lyons House, is residual.
Yeah,
And like I
like
said,
that.
this other spirit could just be a completely different spirit.
Could be.
But in my mind, having a residual haunting that appears to you like that, or let's say something that like stands at the foot of your bed every night from like 2 to 3 a.m.
Yeah.
That would like just that in and of itself is very eerie.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, if it's just taking plates out and putting it on the table, that's way better than like like an annoying inconvenience of like a noise at an like, you know, early
slamming
hours
a
of the morning
door,
or
something. Right. Yeah.
or like locking you out. I've experienced that before where something will like lock me out of my house and I'm like, great, thank you.
Oh, that's
wonderful.
Cool. Well, it's not cool, but it's that sounds cool to me. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, whatever is here, I so at the time of recording this, I have an episode going live tonight where I kind of talk more about my personal experiences with another friend, like podcast friend of mine.
Nice.
But and for those of you who are listening now, you can, it's the episode that went live on Monday, 6/26 or the 25th, depending on where you are in the world. But yeah, so there's something here. We don't really know where it came from, but on a few occasions it's locked like myself or my husband out. And then we have to like climb through the window or something like that.
I'll check that out.
To get back inside. Usually it only happens like I had it happen to me one time where because I work remotely, so I went outside to get on a meeting so that my dog wasn't like freaking out in the background of this because it was kind of like an important call.
Yeah.
And then I go back inside and my door's locked. And I'm like, good, no one's home.
Right.
So I ended up having to like, I ended up having to put like everything back in my car, like my like, you know, computer and stuff like that back in the car because that's where I took the call. And then I climbed through into our laundry room window because it opens. There's no like screen there and it opens like for like I can push it open from the outside.
Yeah.
So I ended up climbing in through that and then unlocked the door and went and got my stuff, came back, and thankfully it didn't happen again. But I was just like, seriously, like the dog is in the kennel. The other dog is at like, she may have been at work, but she also may have been home. But either way, I know that she doesn't like jump up to like lock it.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah.
Wow.
Bonus ghost story for you.
Cool. I will check that out. I love stuff like that. Well, I don't love it for you, Courtney. It sounds like I'm being mean.
Yeah,
but I think that's really cool because I've read a lot of stories like that where people get like blocked out of their house and they're like, oh, come on, it's just a minor.
Yeah, I mean, like that's just like a minor inconvenience, and I'm not. I mean, I wish it wouldn't do that. I have to say that, but I'm not mad that I have the story to share with you by any means. And I mean, if anyone's gonna have a haunted house, it may as well be someone who's interested in it. Right? And I don't know how. I mean, when we bought it, it wasn't made apparent to us, but like the more that I live here and go about my day-to-day routine, I'm like, there's certainly something here that is hanging out in the background. And that's fine. Unless it's like evil.
Yeah, you're not feeling like dread. You're not feeling like uneasiness.
There's stuff that happens here that I don't necessarily like, but I don't want to say that it's like genuinely like evil, at least not right now. But I haven't really investigated it much, and I don't know if I'm comfortable doing that. So the jury's still out there. Okay.
Yeah. Stay tuned. I'm excited.
Yeah, stay tuned. I'll keep you guys in the loop for sure.
Please.
Well, I guess that was all of my story.
Nice. I love it.
So,
unless
you have anything to add, I'd say we hop into your show. And like I said, listeners, you can catch another conversation that we have over on John's podcast, Dairyland Frights, which will be in the show notes. And it's already live by the time that you're listening to this. So definitely go check it out.
Thank you, Courtney. I love that story because it's super interesting to me. When you're not covering the big boys, You know what I mean? Like Amityville. You know, I know we've covered that, or I will cover
Which
it.
we do from time to time, for sure.
Right. But sometimes it's nice to go off the beaten paranormal path, as they say, right? And share something that's pretty cool. So I love your show.
You.
Please check Courtney her out Instagram. Where can we find you?
I'm on, Instagram at HauntsCast. I just started a Twitter if you guys want to check it out. That's also at HauntsCast. And then obviously my website is hauntscast.com. And that's where you can find the show notes for today's episode. If you're like, where is that? How do I find John? How do I find the book you're talking about, or like your information about the story itself? All of that will be included in the show notes at hauntscast.com. So that's probably the best way to stay up to date on what's going on with the show. And then before we end this, will you remind the listeners where we can find you?
Yes. So again, you can find us at Dairyland Frights on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And then also we are on Dairyland Frights podbean.com. So those are, I'm sorry, we're also on YouTube. I always forget because YouTube's been doing these podcasting things and it's kind of messed up, but we're also on YouTube. So YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, podbean.com, Dairyland Fright. So awesome. So do we want to
thanks so much. And
yeah, thank you.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I said thank you. I was just about to say that. Thank you so much. This has been awesome.
Yeah.
I love it.
I had so much fun, and hopefully we can do it again in the future.
Yes.
But for now, go and check out our episode over on Dairyland Frights. And thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.